The EcomCrew podcast is sponsored by Stamped.io, a review platform for your Shopify store. If you aren't collecting reviews, you're simply missing out on valuable user-generated content and getting a much lower conversion rate than you could otherwise. Even if you are collecting reviews, I urge you to check out Stamped.io as they're the best value in Shopify review collection. The EcomCrew podcast is also sponsored by Asia Inspection, the world's leading inspection service. We use them as our eyes and ears on the ground to get every single order inspected before we make our final payment, because once you do, it's too late. So go to ecomcrew.com/inspection to learn more and get a free account manager assigned to you from your very first order. That's ecomcrew.com/inspection. Thanks for supporting the EcomCrew podcast, and now on with the show. This is Mike, and welcome to episode number 113 of the EcomCrew podcast. You can go to ecomcrew.com/113 to get to the show notes and comments for this episode. And today I have Jacqueline, our new Director of Ecommerce, joining me on the podcast. It's been a long time coming, both in getting her hired and on board. If you guys have listened to this show for any length of time, you know this is something I decided to do towards the early part of 2017, but the reality was it took almost 6 months to find Jacqueline, for me to get the confidence that she was the exact right person, and also there was just some other timing issues in between there, things like 6-week trips to China and other things that kind of were going on, so that kind of threw off the timing. And also Jacqueline ended up going on vacation for 3 weeks. For the day that we extended an offer to her, it was a pre-planned vacation, so it was totally fine, and something I'm happy that she was able to go do. But the reality was it took 6 months basically from the day that I decided, okay, let's get Jacqueline in the door, or this position filled, to she actually sitting in a seat and working at our company. And now it's been about 3 months, and I wanted to bring her on and give you guys some insight from her perspective of what that's been like for her, from the hiring process to what she's working on day to day to what she's now seen as problems and opportunities within our business. It's one of these things I talk about all the time, about how I think it's disingenuous to always be talking about all the things that are going right in your business when you know darn well that people have things that aren't working perfectly in their business. So we're going to share a little bit of that here, and we have a long way to go. And again, trying to keep our eye on the macro ball, and even though there's things that we're frustrated with and I know that we can do a better job with, but also taking time to pat ourselves on the back and look at 2017 as a whole and realize we still doubled. We still went from about 2.5 million to 5 million last year. And our hope is to be able to do that again this year, go from 5 million to 10 million this year, and certainly wouldn't even become remotely possible without someone like Jacqueline on board. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. She is not going to be a stranger to this podcast. We'll definitely have her on somewhere between once a month and once a quarter whenever there's something profound to talk about. And I think it'll be cool for you guys to just get some insight into her development and how she's progressing here and the things that she's working on, because again, this is definitely not something that I could have done myself, and I can already see what a difference this is going to make. So we'll talk to you guys on the other side of this interview, and we hope that you enjoy it.
What's the next thing we have to do to keep going? And is that, contacting Amazon or fixing a listing, where in some places we probably should take a step back and think about, where are we going with this brand and how do we picture it in the next 6 months or a year?
Welcome to the EcomCrew podcast, hosted by Mike Jackness and Dave Bryant, who together run e-commerce businesses that generate 8 figures annually. Mike and Dave take pride in running a podcast that isn't just fluff, talking about specific products, problems, and real-world solutions. In the words of one of our favorite reviews, this podcast is like a playbook for e-commerce. You can take any episode and spend the next month trying to implement it. So without further ado, here's the EcomCrew.
Hi, Jacqueline. Welcome to the EcomCrew podcast.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
We're all joking over here because we've been talking about doing this podcast for a few weeks, and the anticipation, I think, is built up to something that it probably isn't. It's just a podcast. So, but thank you for coming on and doing this. As everyone knows, we've talked a lot about you previously on the podcast, and you joined us as a guest for 3 minutes or so on one of the podcasts. We'll put that in the Philippines. So we'll put that in the show notes. And the cool thing about this, I got a new microphone set up here. So Jacqueline and I are sitting in our office at a little table with our iPhone and our little Rode podcaster contraption here. And I think that this can become a regular segment we do on the podcast, either once a month or once a quarter, just kind of talking about what's going on behind the scenes at our overall company. But what I wanted to do with this episode was just give people an idea of what Jacqueline has brought to the table at our organization and have her kind of tell you firsthand all the embarrassing things that she's seen behind the scenes that we haven't been doing right. Because I think, what ends up happening with a lot of these podcasts is everyone, again, they kind of talk about all the things that are going right, and not everything's perfect here. And there's a lot of things that we're working on to improve. We've had a situation where we've been growing at 200 to 300% per year, and that creates a lot of high fives and cool feelings, but also a lot of chaos behind the scenes. And this is something that I knew was a problem last year, and I wanted to solve it. One of my goals in 2017 was to get this person on board and start working towards fixing some of these things in 2017 and beyond. And it took a while to find Jacqueline. It took about 6 months from the day that I decided to make the hire till she was actually here. And it wasn't because of procrastination, but because it takes a long time to find a really good employee, especially someone that's going to be so integral to our business. So let's start with that, like basically how we found you, the process that went through that. Obviously, you don't know all the things that went on behind the scenes first because you weren't here yet, but the process basically was posting on Indeed. For me, it was putting a lot of thought process into the job description, realizing people are only going to read so much. So, just kind of listing out high level duties and things that would attract the right type of person. So I guess the first question I have for you, Jacqueline, is why did you respond to our job post? And has it been anything like what the job post says since then?
What's really funny is I was updating my LinkedIn the other day, and I was looking at the original job post thinking, let me double check if I've done these things or not. And the reality is I've done most of them, which is awesome. So Mike was right on point in what he was looking for. But when I responded to the job post, I kind of read through it and thought that a lot of it had to do with somebody who is really good at organizing and making up processes and has a good business background. But then I read e-commerce experience is a must. And I was like, oh, shoot. But yeah, I think Mike was just looking for a specific personality more than anything else. And I felt that I fit that really well. And so, yeah, I guess that's why I responded, because I could, bring to the table a lot of things that maybe he was missing here. And then he was really, I guess, into teaching everything else. Yeah.
And that's a really good point, because in actuality, as you know, it kind of came down to two people at the very end. We had two really qualified people. Actually, there was three in reality. There were three, but it kind of came down at the very end. It was down to two. And it's interesting because the other person that we were considering had more e-commerce experience. She actually was a high-level executive at a Fortune 500 company doing e-commerce. And in the end, I do think the personality thing is what ended up winning out, because she can teach a lot of this stuff. But at the end of the day, like, the way I look at it is, I'm not that smart. So if I could figure it out, then we could teach other people who are way smarter than me to do a lot of this stuff, right? So, there's certain things that kind of come through in the interview process. And as you know, it isn't like we just do one interview and all of a sudden you're working here. It was 3 or 4.
I mean, the process was pretty long, compared to any other interview process I've endured. But I definitely see the reason why you do it. Yeah. It's, to find the right person and to make sure that they fit in, within your organization. And it's pretty cool, I guess, to get that much face time with somebody that you're going to be working with every day. You have to make sure it's the right person for sure.
Yeah. But, it isn't like you didn't have a background in any of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about your background. You worked at another Fortune 500 company yourself, but in product development. So let's talk just a little bit about that. It was definitely appealing to me, especially as we're considering launching a product a week or so, if we can actually get on that schedule. But you have a background in that, which was cool. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So my educational background is in international business and Spanish. And in the last 8 years, I've basically been working in business and marketing strategy, focusing in the region of Latin America and Canada. And a big part of that position was product development, and product development, not only from the standpoint of producing new products and then handing that off to somebody else, but from the position of developing products, researching what needs to go in those products, doing all the analysis and the market data and the competitor analysis, but then also following that product all the way through sell-through. So it's really like the full life cycle of creating a product and seeing what happens to it and managing it throughout its life cycle. And that's something that I think here is pretty much what we're doing. So I have a pretty good background in that and just managing that process from start to finish and seeing all those little pieces and little details come together. And that's something that we're working on today and is a challenge and exciting in other ways.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely that experience has come in handy, which is a good segue into the next question I want to talk about here, which is what have you been working on so far? So we made a job offer to you. You went on vacation for 3 weeks, right? As we made the job offer, which you had already planned, which was fine, but it was good for me because it gave me time to kind of sit down and think through, okay, how do I want to bring this person on board? Like, I know that there are going to be way more things than we can possibly give somebody at one time to consume. So it was more of less of a let's make sure we don't make this person's head explode or overwhelm them or make them run out the door the first day. I actually remember thinking there was a possibility at the end of the first week that you might not come back on Monday because it was just like, even though I was trying so hard not to give too much, I felt like it was already overwhelming because it is when you're coming into a new organization. And for someone who's already here and like myself, the day that you come to work your first day is just the next day in our journey. But I don't think about the things that I spent the last 4 years learning, or it's hard to communicate all that in a dump at one time, right? So we did, I think the best that I could, I tried to stagger out introducing new things. And we're getting further and further down that point. And we both agreed before you came on board, it would probably take 6 months to fully get on board. So we're about halfway through that. But let's talk about the things that you have been able to do so far, because in my mind, it's a ton of stuff. I see an evolution in our company already. A lot of things are spreadsheets and processes, and let's think about things a different way. And even though we haven't fully been able to implement all that in a life cycle, at least we're talking about it. And I can kind of see the day-to-day way that we did things before, which was hitting the panic button every 30 seconds and realizing that something needs to get done, to trying to have a mind shift of let's plan a month or a quarter in advance and get things in place so we aren't running around with the chicken with its head cut off kind of thing. So yeah, let's dig into that and talk about some of those things that you've been able to implement and at least get on the radar to this point. Sure.
So right when I started, I had about a month before going to China. And that was pretty much like the e-commerce crash course from Mike on all the different, softwares and all the different, I guess, things that we're doing here. And I had that month to kind of wrap my head around that, which obviously isn't a lot of time. And then we went to China for 2 weeks and went to the Canton Fair and, walked around there for a few consecutive days. And so one of the biggest things that I've been working on is new product development. And previous to this, there wasn't exactly a process it was pretty all over the place in terms of new product development. And it still definitely is. And we're working towards making that better. But I spent a lot of my time, contacting and following up with all the manufacturers that we saw there and just improving the products and putting our own spin on them and things like that. So that's definitely taking up the majority of my time just currently. But on top of that, as Mike was saying, creating processes, both, I guess, internally and also with our team in the Philippines has been something that has improved what we're doing. So new products, just trying to figure out what the process is for that. How do we get things launched on time? Inventory in general, how we can make our operation more efficient. And then just internal processes, like how do we want to, come up with our basic strategy for the next year or quarter or week or month. Those types of things has been something that I've been working on. And then I touched a little bit upon inventory management, but that's something that more recently I've become more involved in, and something that definitely takes up a lot of time initially because you're trying to clean up what has kind of happened and trying to figure out just make things more accurate and what's been happening, and just try to make it a more efficient operation, I guess. And then just continue to learn everything about e-commerce that there is to learn. So just thinking about, our Shopify stores and Facebook ads and how to leverage the data that we get from that to do better marketing, and Amazon PPC, which is something that we've also been working on recently. So those are, I guess, the main things, but doesn't even start to touch really what we have left to work on and what I do on a daily basis.
I think the reality is it'll probably take more like a year to implement everything. By the time you really look at it, 6 months will just kind of get us to the point where we're really kind of rocking and rolling with it. So the next question I have, this will be one of these tough things to hear, but I already know a lot of the answers to this. But Jacqueline and I did not talk in advance of doing this podcast. I like to do that type of stuff with almost everything that I do with this podcast, because otherwise it becomes staged or I don't know, it's just not as real. So the question I have here, and I'm curious to get your input on this, is what things you see wrong in our business as someone new coming in. And I think that you probably could put those things in different buckets. So like, let's start with the absolute worst sins. Like, what are the things when you go home at night and you're like having a drink with your boyfriend or some friends or something, and you're like, I cannot believe like the circus over there I tear, like the crap that, like, you won't believe like some of that. What are those couple of things? Or just like, oh my God, this is just like, what the hell did I get myself into? Or like, why? Like, what are they doing? Like, why? Well, we got to fix this right away. What are those things?
Wow. So I didn't quite think about it like that. I just made a general list. But I think just overall, coming from a company or a corporation rather with a lot more people that's, worldwide, and then working for a smaller company, just in general, there's obviously a lack of organization and being understaffed and things not getting done, I guess, in the most appropriate way or efficient way, I should say. Those are probably the things that I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like, how do I approach this? But I think in general, the typical problems that you see that a business that's scaling for growth, it has, are that, there's not a lot of processes set up. So the general lack of organization is definitely something that I think about. And in general, for me, my personality is, how can I organize this? How can I make it more efficient? What things would automatically improve our day, I guess. So those are the things that I think about. And then how to best utilize the staff that we have. And so as a company that's growing, obviously we don't have a ton of money to hire, 10 new people at once. And so how can we best utilize the people that we have here and in the Philippines to do what we need to get done and to achieve our goals? And I think we've hired probably at least 5 or 6 people in the Philippines since I've started, which is kind of crazy to think about. But they've contributed in massive ways to what we're doing. So that's not necessarily, I guess, that's probably a good thing in the list of this, is that, we're getting places, and that's obviously the reason why I was hired as well. I think another thing is probably focusing on daily activities a bit much and losing sight a little bit of the big picture. And I think that's just Mike in general having help now, that he can use more time to focus on those bigger picture things and let go of some of the daily activities. But I think it's very easy in a business like this where, what's the next thing we have to do to like keep going? And is that, contacting Amazon or fixing a listing, where in some places we probably should take a step back and think about, where are we going with this brand and how do we picture it in the next 6 months or a year? And what are our big goals? And not that none of that's happening, but I guess it's not happening in an official way. And so it's like floating around in Mike's head, and I need that information out in front of us so everybody else can see it. And then also, I think a big challenge is just using the data and metrics that we have to make better decisions. And so I think this goes along more with like focusing on the daily activities. Obviously, we're getting a ton of great metrics from all of the campaigns we're running from Facebook ads and on Amazon and things like that. But how can we better utilize that to make decisions that impact our business and, just do better marketing in general? And give visibility to people who aren't Mike, who, who need to see the results of what they're doing and, what their day-to-day tasks are affecting, and things like that. So it wasn't bad at all, I think. I don't think that, were you expecting me to be that nice? Yeah,
I figured there was going to be a much worse list than that. I don't know, maybe I just see it from a different perspective. I'm more of a perfectionist. Like, I know that there's like problems, there's things that we should be doing a better job of, and it drives me crazy, like day to day. Like, I see things that we aren't doing as good of a job on. I know we could be doing, but at the same time, which I always like talk to my wife about, Michelle,
we have to also like look at the macro part of it, which is that we still doubled from last year. You went from like 2.5 to 5 million last year. We're going to try to hopefully do that again and go to 10 million next year. So yeah, there was a bunch of like disarray and like crap show stuff that kind of happens behind the scenes, but that keeps us from getting the explicit tag on the podcast. But there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that are like not as efficient or as good as they could be, and we want to work on that. It isn't that we don't want to make that better, but at the same time, we had to look at the bigger picture and go, okay, we achieved this amazing goal of being able to double with a small crew and all the other challenges that go on in running a business day to day. But we know that that's going to continue to get harder. Like, I mean, there's a bigger and bigger headwind. It isn't just doubling from 5 to 10 million next year. When I was younger and more foolish in my entrepreneurial career, I used to think that it would be easier, like every time you double, because like you're just using this quote unquote cookie cutter approach, and it's going to be so easy to just apply this to the next thing. But the reality is that is not the way that business works. Unfortunately, some things become easier because you're doing them a second or third time, or you're replicating it. But when you go from $5 million business to a $10 million business, that business inherently just has another whole set of challenges that like rear their ugly head that you weren't even thinking of when you were at a $5 million business. So yes, some things behind the scenes are happening in a cookie cutter approach, but now you're dealing with some other set of circumstances that you didn't even prepare for, and things become more amplified as they fall through the cracks. It becomes a bigger and bigger issue, and trying to juggle, it's easier to juggle 2 balls. It gets harder to juggle 4 when you like go to the point where you start trying to juggle 200 or whatever the number gets to be as one person or a smaller team. Eventually things just start falling apart. So it's planning for that. Also just realizing strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I think that the reason that things aren't necessarily as organized as you would like, Jacqueline, being someone who's ultra organized, which was, by the way, one of the things that I'm sure you probably picked up on in the interview process, was something that I brought up over and over and over again. I think it's important to like hire for your weaknesses. Like as an entrepreneur or as a CEO or whatever, you should not be the smartest guy in the room. You want to surround yourself with smarter and better people than you. And also, again, hire for your weaknesses. I know that like organization is not my strong suit. This is not a big revelation and or paperwork or doing certain things. I enjoy certain aspects of the business. The things I don't do a good job with, and it just gets worse. Why not have a Batman or a Robin to the Batman kind of thing or whatever? It is one of the things that I was looking to hire for, just trying to find all the things I see in myself that are weaknesses in another person to help get us to the next level. And I think you've done a lot of that already. Like, I mean, I see inventory planning already doing much better. I look at where we were 6 months ago in the new product development process. We went to the Canton Fair, found all these great products, and hit a wall because it is not easy being organized enough to stay on top of all these disparate manufacturers, trying to launch multiple products at once, get packaging design for them and the photography done, the Amazon listing done, getting samples in, placing the order, placing the deposit, doing an inspection, getting the stuff like on a boat over here. Like, and the way I look at it is we want to be running an orchestra or running something that I would be like equivalent, people could use as analogy, as like a really nice restaurant. You sit 8 people down at a restaurant at a table, and at a really fancy restaurant, like all 8 plates like show up at one time on the table, like everyone starts eating at the exact same moment. It isn't staggered out. There was the opposite at one of the meals we had in the Philippines. It was actually pretty funny. Like one meal like dripped out over it. I was like, this is how our business is right now. It's like pretty dripped out and efficient. But like when you're launching a new product, it should be like that, like amazing wow factor that you see at an amazing restaurant, where like everything just like plops down on your table at the exact same moment. And it just like that in itself is impressive. And that's what we're trying to aspire to do. Like when we launch a product, there should be like immense efficiencies in the amount that we're ordering and the speed at which from when we place our deposit till this thing shows up here, from the time that it shows up here to what's actually up and running on Amazon and all of our channels. And it isn't launched in a half-ass way to where there's long-term repercussions in a negative way, because we've now determined scientifically that the way that you launch an Amazon listing is really important, and having a big bang out of the gates is really important. So we have to have like all those things working in unison to do that. And that's what excites me about 2018. The thing is that like, I know that those are not my strong suits. I know that if I was the one still in charge of all that, it would be a massive failure. So like knowing that there's someone that's way better at it than me, is exciting. So enough about that. We've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but I had another question here of like, what challenges do you see now that you've been here for 3 months? I mean, obviously we talked about organization and processes, and some of those things we already started before you got here, but we weren't doing it nearly the level that we're going to do moving forward. But flipping it a little bit differently and phrasing the question differently, like the challenges, what do you see? Like the process stuff isn't really a challenge as much as like it just got to get done. What are the things that you see that are going to be actually difficult to overcome or do over the next 6 months or 12 months?
Yeah, so speaking about the next 12 months, I think one of the biggest challenges I'll have is trying to achieve our goal of becoming an 8-figure business next year.
Yeah.
So that entails, I mean, just so many things, but I think just discussing and implementing a strategy, and on top of that, making sure that we have enough products to launch to support those goals and getting everything done on time. That's going to be a big one. And it's not because we can't do it at all. Like, I have no doubts about that. It's definitely doable. But I think it's just the timing that I kind of showed up here. I got like put into the middle of it and didn't have like exactly, I guess I didn't get to plan it out from start to finish. And so just working with what I have and then the products that we're developing now is something that is a little challenging. But I think we can still do it. And then another one is just developing the staff we have to be able to get what we need done. I think employee development is something that's really important and something that we should focus on, I guess, a lot in the next year. And then I guess the last one would be like just managing the brands that we have in different life cycles. And so we have Color It, that's like a very mature brand that we've, kind of saturated our audience a bit on Facebook. And we're thinking now of new products to launch potentially for that brand or where it's going to go. And you just become much more limited once you've reached that point with a specific brand, and what strategy are we going to take for that and what are we going to do there. And then in contrast, we have a brand like Wild Baby that we're essentially just launching, although we've had some products there for a while. But just starting up that brand on the right foot and how to create a really loyal brand following and how to develop the appropriate brand image. So you can see that there's definitely challenges amongst the brands that we have, and just how to deal with those, I think, is going to be one of the things that in the short term we'll be discussing and implementing within the next year.
Yep. I think I definitely agree with all that. So on a more positive note, on the flip side, what do you see what are you excited about? Like, what do you see as like the big opportunities, or what are you personally excited about, like in this role and for the company?
Yeah, so I definitely, when you said that, I definitely take it more of like personally what I'm excited about. And I think one of the best things about working here is that anything that we decide or any action that I take or that we take as a team has pretty much immediate tangible results. And for me, that's very fulfilling, being able to see, your work turning into something and, being able to just have that effect. And it's something that's so true in e-commerce, because you can, split test a Facebook ad or basically do anything immediately, and the next day you can see the results. And that's something, being a marketer, that a traditional marketer, I guess you can say, you can't throw up a billboard or throw up an ad in a magazine and then even attribute any metrics to those things. Yeah. They're just there, and you have to like kind of hope for the best and hope that, people that are seeing that stuff, and in e-commerce it's totally different. And so that's the thing that excites me, I guess, and being able to see those results is something that's really exciting. And then since I've been working so much on the product development side, just seeing those products come to fruition, being able to like hold them and see them and launch them and just creating amazing 5-star products is fun. And so that's something that definitely excites me. And then just the potential of, growing and becoming an 8-figure business is something to aspire to, and something that's definitely a challenge. But I mean, I love challenges, and I love, doing this type of stuff, and it's all very exciting, I guess.
Yeah. This is what excites nerds.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the just the life cycle of launching stuff and how quickly you get response back from that, because that's like, to me, it's like actually addictive. Like it's something that when I first got involved in online marketing 15 years ago, it certainly didn't exist. And it's funny that it, like, specifically that you mentioned it, because you also, like the next thing you mentioned, you didn't even realize that you're talking about like the life cycle of getting products developed. And it's like this weird circumstance where like you get in one part of your life, you can get instant feedback, but then when you're trying to develop a product from China, it's like a 6-month life cycle. Yeah. And you're so used to this like instantaneous like response, but it takes like almost 6 months from the time, like we're talking about products right now that we aren't going to see here until like early or late spring, early summer.
Right.
That's really difficult to like get your head around when you're talking about things on another side of the business. Most of our business, for the most part, is like this instant gratification or instant, like it didn't work and I can go try something different. Mm-hmm. The product life cycle is much different, and it could be a lot more depressing if you like, because you don't get to try again, like hit the reset button and try again tomorrow. If the product doesn't work, it's there's a lot more consequences to it. So yeah. So the next question I had here was, what do you see as our growth opportunities as we? I mean, again, you're just kind of starting to get in the door now, but you've got some information on your belt. We've gone over our P&L and other statistics here. As we're trying to go from 5 million to 10 million next year, what do you see like the biggest growth opportunities? How are we going to achieve the bulk of that extra $5 million in business?
So, I mean, I talked about this pretty much in every question, I think, but new products are going to be the way that we get there for sure, first and foremost. But also discovering maybe new niches and developing products to fit those. And I mean, I think that's going to be a big opportunity. And we have a few things that we've been discussing that we're really just in the, I guess, beginning stages of. But I think it has a big possibility to impact our business. And I think it's one of the best ways that we're going to be able to get to that level of growth, whether it's this year or next year. I think there's definitely a huge opportunity there. More on just, I guess, marketing activities, producing new and exciting content, I think is where we have a massive opportunity to improve the type of marketing we're doing. And not that we're doing a bad job at all. I think that Mike pretty much has this dialed down to something that he knows what he's doing. But we have awesome graphic designers in the Philippines that we've been working with, and they've been producing some amazing stuff. We've been doing a lot of time-lapse videos for Color It, and they just can put together graphics really fast. And I guess just leveraging video more across all of our activities will be really helpful. So I just think that, the content aspect of it is something that we've been working on recently that will have a big impact. Also, just paying more attention and developing our, strategy on Amazon PPC. That's something that we've been working on recently, and that's one of those things that has like a immediate effect. And so the second you start doing that and you see sales double, you're like, whoa, like why haven't we been doing this before or paying more attention to it? And how can we continue to do this in a way that we're putting that up there and then evaluating it and making decisions based on it? So with,
that scale, that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When you do it for 5 products, it's like super easy to be on top of it. But for 200 products, it gets tough to analyze all that data and constantly be on top of it. And so that's actually one of the things you've been helping work. I mean, we have the staff now and trying to carve out someone's either full-time or a significant amount of their time to be able to stay on top of that and not let them get their eye off the ball of that. It's definitely difficult to do. Easier said than done. But I think that I agree there's a big opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think the last thing is more just developing our brands. So we pretty much have a brand, I think, in almost every product life cycle at this point, or brand life cycle, if you will. So we have 2 new brands or newish brands that we haven't really done too much with up until now. And so I'm excited to get those launched. And I think they have the potential to be just as great as Color It, which I feel like around here is kind of like the flagship brand and gets most of the attention, but that's about to change in 2018.
Yeah.
And then we have Ice Wraps that there's a huge possibility just to do a lot more. It's kind of like the, I guess, stepchild, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome brand and we have awesome products, and I think we can put a lot more attention to that. And that just goes hand in hand with developing, our employees here and getting that back on track. And so I think there's a good opportunity just to kind of be more detailed in what we do on our brands, and there's a lot of growth there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that probably 30 to 50% of our growth will come from launching new products. Of that 5 million we need to do, I think that another 35 30% or so probably will come from international marketplace. I don't know if that was on your list, but we've been...
It wasn't. I totally forgot about that one.
So we're launching into Canada, UK, and hopefully all of Europe. And I think, another third of it basically is going back and auditing our existing stuff and doing a better job, like you were mentioning with PPC. Significant amount of opportunity there. It is a lot of work, attention to detail type of thing that I'm not great to. I can do it once or twice, and I'm like really good at figuring it out and doing it, but then it becomes boring for me, and redoing that on scale for me is difficult. And unfortunately, I was the one that was in charge of that and doing a horrible job. So I definitely see immense opportunity there, but also auditing our listings from just a content perspective. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but better photography, better titles, better descriptions, making sure enhanced brand content's there, basically making sure that like all of our bases are covered as efficiently as possible. Because it's easier and better to do that with an existing product than go launch another whole new one, because it's more efficient to be ordering more of the same thing than going out and finding another whole widget to like start producing. But the problem is like the inherent, like at least for me, the inherent, and the reason we're in this position, it's inherently more exciting and interesting to go launch a new product than like to go back and play with the existing one, because it's no longer new and neat and fun anymore. But that's like a really bad way to look at business and take care of business. And so we're going to try to get back to doing that, but also like being able to do all of this concurrently. That's like probably the other challenge, right?
That's probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, we're trying to like run 3 races at once, and we're trying to fix existing listings at the same time. We have to we know we have to be launching new products right now. I mean, you can do the math backing out. If we do want to double again next year, do another $5 million in business, there's absolutely no way to get there, like any way, shape, or form, without more SKUs. Like it just isn't mathematically feasible to just expect us to get that by launching in the new marketplaces, or to be going back and auditing existing listings. So we have to start that now, in addition to all the other things we want to do. So it makes a crunch time and kind of chaos scenario right now, but I think that we'll kind of get over that hump, and hopefully it'll pay off by the end of 2018. So we are at our 30-minute mark. We try to keep these to 30 minutes. So we have one more question. We'll save that for another podcast for another time, because like I said, I hope to do these every at least once a quarter. I think it's good for people to understand another insider's perspective of what's going on here at Terran, at our overall company. Just so you guys know, our overall company is called Terran. We don't really ever talk about that name much, just because it's just a holding company, but it's the company that holds Ice Wraps, Color It, Wall Baby, and Tactical. And we also, like, again, own Survival Food, all the things that kind of go around Tactical, and all the different things that we do here, including EcomCrew. So when we refer to this whole thing as a conglomerate, it's Terran, and it's neat to see someone that has a different perspective besides just me. And obviously, I think that after listening to this podcast for a little bit over 30 minutes, you get a good idea of like how impressive Jacqueline is, just like in her business demeanor and just personality, and what she's going to bring to this company. And it'll be fun to do an update in another 3 months and another 3 months after that, and talk about like all the things that we've achieved. So thank you for coming on and doing this today.
Yeah,
I think you were a little bit nervous to start with for some reason, or it was the anticipation of doing it, or I don't know. It was funny because when I first asked Jacqueline about this, she's like, "Oh, I can't wait to do the podcast." And then like right before we did the podcast, it was like, "Oh, like I got to make a phone call, or I got to go like order some food, or do they like, let's see if we can percuss it just a little bit." But
well, you just set the bar so high. You're such a professional at this.
Whatever. This is the first time that Jacqueline's ever tried to butter me up. I don't know what's maybe we're recording this right before the holidays. She's happy it's Christmas season. This will go out in January, but everyone's kind of got holiday brain right now because we're giving everyone off between Christmas and New Year's. Something I think that's important to let people kind of refresh and kind of get back to the swing of things in 2018. Unfortunately, the Philippines doesn't get the week off between Christmas and New Year because they just have a lot of holidays. They get to do it all year round.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never known a country that has as many holidays, I think, as them. But good for them. It's awesome. They get to experience some longer 3-day weekends throughout the year that we don't get. But we're making it up now this week. So awesome. Thank you again, Jacqueline, for coming on. And we'll try to catch up in a couple of months.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Jacqueline, our new director of e-commerce. Again, we hope that she won't be a stranger on the podcast. I had fun recording it with her. I think that she did too. And hopefully that gave you some insight into what we're doing here at Terran and the things that she's working on and the difference that she's able to make at a company that's growing as fast as it is and on track to do 8 figures in 2018. Kind of a scary number to throw out there. So if you want to go to the show notes for this episode or leave a comment, you can go to ecomcrew.com/113 to get to those show notes. And until the next episode, everybody, happy selling, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the EcomCrew podcast. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/EcomCrew for weekly live recordings of the EcomCrew podcast every Monday. And please do us a favor and leave an honest review on iTunes. It would really help us out. Again, thanks for listening. And until next week, happy selling.